and welcome to a discussion between Susan Ashley, Jerry Marzinsky, and myself, Claire Edwards. Let me introduce, first of all, Jerry. So I've got his short bio here. So Jerry is a retired licensed psychotherapist with over 40 years of experience working with and studying the thought processes of psychotic and criminally insane patients in some of the most volatile psychiatric institutions in America. Jerry is a commercial pilot, certified scuba diver, and long-distance motorcyclist. He has held the positions of second lieutenant in the Arizona Civil Air Patrol and assistant scoutmaster. He was awarded the State of Arizona's Meritorious Service Award and the Pima College Apple Award of Teaching Abnormal Psychology. His formal academic training comprises a BA in psychology from Temple University, a master's degree in counseling from the University of Georgia, and 2 years of study in a PhD psychology program. He is the co-author of An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower, and currently has a private practice in Arizona. So, Jerry, very nice to meet you.
Good to be with you guys.
So I'll introduce myself. I am Claire Edwards. I'm sort of known as a UN whistleblower because I brought attention to what was going on at the UN in Vienna with the installation of public access points, which were irradiating people at the Vienna duty station. And I brought this to the attention of the UN Secretary General and also brought his attention to the dangers of 5G. And he denied all knowledge of any such dangers. But in fact, Antonio Guterres is a physicist and an electrical engineer. So of all people, he definitely knows about the dangers of exposure to electromagnetic radiation. So after that, I became a campaigner against the expansion of electromagnetic radiation in general, and particularly 5G. So that's where I stand today, sort of five years of that. And the whole COVID thing, in my view, is exposure to electromagnetic radiation. So if you like, the campaigning or my campaigning morphed into also campaigning about the COVID scam. So that's me. Susan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, thanks, Claire. So I'm Susan Ashley. I consider myself a spiritual consultant and healer. I was a psychotherapist, moved away from that due to many, many years working with sexual ritual abuse. And as a result of that, kind of went into the spiritual side of things, the energetic side of things, which changed my career completely. And I could no longer hold a license to practice because of that, because of the way that I was going and the restrictions that were happening in Australia at the time. So now I predominantly assist people into aligning their, let's say, mental body with their emotional body and their spiritual body. And I love to teach meditation. I do one-on-ones, small groups, things like this. And I'm just enjoying life, but I really love talking to people and discovering new ways that we can help ourselves and be free of any medical interference or even religious interference in some ways, because I think religion is a good foundation for morals and integrity, but it can also be not so nice as far as restrictions and separation from God. So, yeah, that's what I do. Anyway, I'm happy to be here as part of this discussion. So I'll hand it back to you, Claire.
Thank you. So what we want to look at today is the demonic, basically. I think that the electricity has something to do with the demonic. And we'll get into this in a minute, what Rudolf Steiner said about electricity. And I'm particularly interested in what Jerry has to say about schizophrenics, because he's basically saying that these voices are demonic, and they're using frequency to connect with people. Obviously, I'll let Joey speak for himself. So we want to talk about those two aspects, but also we want to talk about the solutions. I do think, it's not just about enlightening people, but it's also about offering those very important solutions. And I think you have a lot to say on this, Susan. So Jerry, I would say one of your theses in your book is that the scientific revolution effectively robbed us of our connection with the divine and left us vulnerable to demons simply because we no longer acknowledge that they exist,
That's true. They're still there, and they're still hitting us. Matter of fact, Emanuel Swedenborg, a Christian mystic, said that they hit all of us, and that virtually every negative thought that goes through your mind comes from them.
Yeah. And you mention in your book that we all have these negative thoughts. We're not just talking about schizophrenics.
Right.
I think we've all had the experience of, you're sort of sitting with your auntie holding a porcelain cup, and suddenly you think, oh, I could smash this against the wall. Where does it come from? All these strange thoughts.
They don't ask that question. They do not ask where thoughts come from. They just totally ignored it. And all behavior originates from thought. It doesn't just spring up spontaneously and you go out and do something insane. I mean, it comes from a thought.
Yes.
That's one of the most critical questions they could ask. And all the universities, the psychiatry, psychology, they ignore it. They just totally ignore it.
Well, it's because in academia, there's always an orthodoxy. Whatever field of academia you're looking at, there's always an orthodoxy. And you're not allowed to deviate from the orthodoxy. And if you do, you are immediately expelled. But we have, I think, Bruce Lipton to thank for educating us about the fact that the brain is actually a transceiver, transmitter-receiver.
Yes.
And so the problem with schizophrenics, it seems to me, is that the brain allows us to focus on this particular reality. If the brain was open to all dimensions and all realities, we wouldn't be able to concentrate on this reality. So our brains are attenuators, which bring us into focusing here. But the problem for schizophrenics is that they're tuned into something else. They're hearing something else, which the rest of us don't generally hear. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah, it's our brains, our physical bodies are attuned to physical reality. That's where we spend most of our time. But it's the spiritual reality that underlies all of that. Everything's got a spirit. I mean, the plants, the animals, there's a spiritual backing behind, like a skeleton, a spiritual skeleton behind all of physical reality.
And that was acknowledged in the animist religions. All religions were originally animist, and they saw God in all things, in streams, in trees, in nature.
Yeah, we're in God and God's in us.
Yes.
It's we create our own personal universe. Manuel Swedenborg, the Christian mystic, he lived some 300 years ago. He said, none of your thoughts are your own. They either come in from heaven, they come in from hell. Yeah. So from what I've experienced, the mind is like a radio receiver. It picks up different frequencies. And if you look at the background of schizophrenics, they have a horrible, for the most part, I'd say 90% of them have a horrible background, physical, sexual, emotional abuse to the extreme. You know.
Okay, so I find that very interesting. So there's something there that triggers this trauma background, and I think this is something that Susan could definitely comment on.
It's a very low frequency that's established once they're brutalized like that. So
Yes,
they come to expect that, and if you expect it, you get it. You know,
yeah,
from then on they're creating a very low frequency universe for themselves.
yeah.
Mm.
You know,
Um,
and that reinforces itself. So it's like a self-perpetuating reality.
Susan, can you shed light on this? Because I know that you have had a lot of patients in the past who have experienced satanic ritual abuse. And
Mm.
I'm interested in the fact that it would appear, I'm no expert in this area, but it would appear that the purpose of the satanic ritual abuse, so in, I don't know, aristocratic families, they do this to their own children, and it seems to make those children um, open to the spirit realm.
Yeah, well, you have different kinds, different levels. So what you're referring to with the aristocrats, all those particular bloodlines, is a way of carrying on the family tradition of being tied to certain demonic frequencies. So they do rituals at particular ages that literally link the demon to the child. And what I found very interesting was that I would have people come from England, from America, from Europe, and even in Australia, that all told me the same story, but they didn't know each other.
Yes, yeah.
So I realized that was deliberate. And then you have other, attacks where it's like an imprint. I would see it like an energetic wounding. So there's the physical wounding, the emotional, mental wounding, but there's also the energetic wounding that keeps the person, like Jerry was saying, it keeps the person in that energy. It keeps happening again and again. So it may not be the rape or the abuse over again and again, but it would be something like that, like being treated like as if your thoughts and your feelings don't matter, or feeling powerless, feeling out of control, these sort of things all the time. So I've faced, I'm sure Jerry can say the same thing, I've faced demons, and faced demons energetically and physically through people as well as energetically. And it's not for the lighthearted. You have to be really clear in your connection to God in order to cope with it. So when I say about religion, I mean that the religion as it is now, to what I see, separates people from God, because they put a third person in there that says, I'll forgive your sins and I'll do this and I'll give you the ritual and but we actually go through our own spiritual initiations anyway, independent of any religion or anyone else. So that's where our growth comes from as a spiritual being, is whether we say yes or no to behaving in a certain way, like Christ did. He was tempted, and many people are tempted. We're all tempted. We all go through it. It's which side of the fence we listen to. As Jerry said, are we listening to heaven or hell?
So
I wonder, sorry, Jerry, carry on.
what's so tricky about that is, like I was telling you guys when we first started, is that these insertions into your thought stream, they're very how do you call it, sneaky. Okay, they will insert a thought into your thought stream, and it sounds just like the tens of thousands of other thoughts that go through your mind on a regular day. But it'll be, and I think one of the most common that I see in my private practice is, you're worthless, you're not good enough. Those two, worthless and not good enough. I mean, that's one of the most common ones that they slip in there. I'd say 85 to 90% of the people I work with, they come in with that programmed into their mind. Okay. And we can get it out within an hour, but it has run their entire lives since, some of them, these people are, 75, 80 years old, and something happened to them when they were 6 or 7. And they made a decision based on that trauma that they were worthless, they weren't good enough, and that they were stupid. And they lived their entire lives with that program. Okay. Now, Mace calls that a negative identity. It's a program that was developed, and it's in there running in the background because it's now in the subconscious mind. It started off as a trauma. The trauma got moved into the subconscious, and now they're not aware of it. Okay? So it's actually working just like a computer virus. And once you get a program like that running, it can't help but manifest into physical reality, but you're not aware of it. And one of the ways it shows up is if you were traumatized by a certain kind of person when you were young, every time that kind of person shows up in your psychological sphere, there's a reaction to this buried stuff from the trauma. It's a fight or flight reaction. You either want to run or you want to attack that person. The second way it manifests is when you get into a jam that you've been in that jam before 3 or 4 times, 5 times, and you swear, I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to get back here again. I'm sick of this. And 6 months later, you're right back there again. Okay. Now that's a negative identity. It's not a entity. Okay. So it's a program, and we can do something about that. We can get rid of that in an hour. Okay. Now, entities are a different story. They will insert a thought in your thought stream, and one of those thoughts is you're not good enough. It'll be you're stupid, or attack this guy, or it could be any virtually negative thought that isn't inserted by a negative identity. Okay, so you got those two things working against you. You got these entities, these demonic entities, and you got programming that you picked up through abuse.
Yeah. And Jerry, what I find fascinating, or well, not fascinating, wonderful about the work that you do, which is very similar to my own way of thinking and working, is that you've navigated the system to create ways in which to really help people, not medicate them, but to really help them. And this is what's important, because most people go to someone, like you probably have clients, I have clients that have been going to someone for 15, 20 years with the same problem, like you were just expressing, the same thing over and over and over again. And until you reach someone who genuinely doesn't want to medicate you and who is really wanting to work with you, you're going to be in that loop, right?
Yeah, and that's what I loved about the Mace energy method. I mean, I've been in this for 50 years. Nothing seemed to work. The stuff they taught in the university, it doesn't work. All this special training, I mean, and I got tons of it. It doesn't work. When I ran into the Mace energy method, I mean, I looked at that and I went, hey, this guy's got something here. And the guy who invented that was not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. He was a master mariner. He was a ship captain. He drove these big freighters across the ocean back and forth. And he was brilliant. He always wanted to know what kind of psychotherapy, or why psychotherapy was failing. And he found it was because it didn't take the person's identity into account. Right? So there's positive identities, there's negative identities. We're not worried about the positive identities. They were created on purpose to help you survive on this planet. Negative identities were created unconsciously during a trauma, and because they were so painful, the ego took them and buried them in the subconscious mind. Then they became what we know as a negative identity. It becomes a program. And it has all these lines to it. So during a trauma, you make a decision about who you are unconsciously. Okay? That decision sticks with you for the rest of your life. The Mace energy method can go out and it can get rid of that in an hour or less. Something that's been running your life for your life for decades. Okay, so what it does is it actually will drain that negative identity. It's akin to a car battery. You know, when you get a car battery and you drain it down to absolutely nothing, you can't recharge it again. These negative identities are a program that's running in the back of your mind, in your subconscious, affecting your behavior. You're not aware of it. And what the Mace energy method does is it goes in there and it actually drains all the energy from that negative identity. Okay? So Mace, being a ship captain, he had to know about magnetism. He had to know about electricity. He had to know about how electricity flowed, how energy flowed. He had to know about navigation. So there's one very, what do you call it, physics, hard physics part of this therapy. The second part is a spiritual part. Okay? So Mace knew that energy flowed from the negative to the positive. Your spirit is positive. It always was, it always will be. Okay? Now, his challenge was how to link up that negative identity to the spirit where it will be drained. Okay? So it is a negative identity is negative energy. So he's like, okay, how do we connect it? How do we connect it so it will flow to the spirit to be transformed into positive energy? And he found that that can be done by images. He said the mind is not what you think it is or what we're told it is. He said the mind just takes pictures of where you put your attention. That's all it does. It doesn't do any thinking. It doesn't do any evaluating. It doesn't do any anything else than take pictures of where you put your attention. The spirit does everything else. It does the thinking. It does the talking. It does the rationalizing. It does the reading. It does everything else. It does the seeing. It does the feeling. Okay, so Mace found that pictures are energy. Okay,
Yeah.
and that if you can get a picture of that trauma, then you can hook it up to the attention and it will flow. The negative energy will flow through that image, and the image is actually where it's located in the subconscious. It took the last years of his life were spent figuring out where did the ego bury that trauma in the subconscious mind? You know, where did it go? He found that the image is the location. All right. So if you can get an image of the components of that trauma, all the components of that trauma put together, and focus your attention on it, that energy will flow through the attention, through the negative identity, and then back to the spirit where it will be transformed, not destroyed, but transformed into positive energy. And Susan, you went through this. We gave you a May session. Could you talk
Yeah.
about what you experienced there?
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because I do a method very similar to that I kind of came up with spirit and the work that I did. But it's not easy to find someone who can help me, right? Probably it's the same for you because we're already in the game. So we've kind of got our own thing going on. And to find someone that I trust also to divulge vulnerable personal things to as well is not so easy, and also people who would understand that level of how can I say, the deepness of it. So it was a very good session. Yeah, we did a session over a major trauma I had in my life some years ago, and every time I would think of that trauma, something would trigger it. I'd think of it, I would have pain in my body. And since that session, I don't have any pain. I said to you, I'm really relaxed. I felt really relaxed. I can think about the situation and I don't feel tight or like distressed. So I would, for years, I would sort of go I've done everything, Jerry, really, to look at that from different angles, to work on it, but there was always a component missing. There was always that part that, you know, I did a lot of work on it because it was a very horrendous situation that I shared with you, but there was always, my body reacted when I would think of it. So I knew that there was something else still there. And I'll be honest, Jerry, I've been to a lot of different people to work on that. But that was the first time that I felt afterwards this clarity, calm, and my body. It was my body that was the biggest register for me, because I think women tend to feel their body a little bit more than men, because we go through different cycles, we give birth, we have to be in tune with our body a little bit more. So for me, that was the biggest thing. And I also felt pretty, I had some emotions over that, and I'm not feeling that. So that was good. I really am grateful.
It gets rid of these kind of things. I mean, and they don't come back. It's not like you sit there and talk about them and beat them over and over and over again, and after you feel good for a little while, and then after a week or two, it's back. It's gone permanently. And the other thing really interesting about this energetic therapy is the therapist does not have to know what the trauma was. Yeah. So I don't know how many times I will come out of a session and go, I wonder what actually happened to that person, because I have no clue.
I don't told me that, so I told you a little bit of it because I felt for you, because I would be the same. I would want to know, curiosity, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, sometimes I can figure it out. Other times I have no idea.
Yeah.
So, if you're thinking about taking these toxic psychiatric meds that the psychiatric mafia is feeding you, please contact a causism therapist first. There's only 50 of us on the planet right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go to causisminstitute.com. There's a list of those 50 therapists there. Please do yourself a favor and do that before you start filling your body with these toxic meds. It's been shown over and over again that these antipsychotic meds actually rot out your brain and your peripheral nervous system with long-term use. And they're giving them to kids now. Mace works for kids. And mace is a lot cheaper than these drugs that they're using to poison you with.
Yeah.
So that would be CAUSISM Institute.com. And there's a whole list of therapists there. Please try those before you start taking these toxic meds.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
And the other thing it does is, even though in a lot of cases it won't get rid of the voices that schizophrenics have, but it will weaken the trauma that they feed off of. Because what the voices will do is they'll go, oh, you remember when you did this thing, or you remember when this happened to you. So it's all negative energy that they go in there and they drum it up. And then they generate that negative emotional energy, and that's their food. That's what they feed off of. That's why they plague schizophrenics. They're energetic entities. They're not physical. They operate in a totally different realm. They can go in there, they can see every trauma that ever happened to you. They can put thoughts in your mind. They can tell you stuff that you normally shouldn't know. I mean, especially with meth addicts. I don't know how many meth addicts told me when I ran out of meth, the voices came and they told me where to be and when to be there, and somebody showed up with more meth. That was common.
Mm.
So they want to keep you in that low vibration because they feed off of that negative energy. They can't stand positive energy. They can't deal with it. And you look at what the mainstream media is doing right now. I mean, it matches that list of negative patterns that I sent you guys that the voices repeat.
Yeah. I was reading somebody the other day who said that the news is actually trauma-based mind control.
Yes. And if you look at that list of patterns that I sent you guys that the schizophrenic voices run, if you read through that list, 90% of them can be seen on the mainstream media, what they're feeding us. It's the same entities that are taken over by the mainstream media that run schizophrenics' lives. These people are crazy.
Don't you think that most people are traumatized one way or another?
I think so. I think
Yeah,
this is a very hard planet to live on. You know,
yeah.
you're not gonna. I know very few people that weren't traumatized
Mm,
horribly at some point.
mm,
I think it's more a common phenomenon.
yeah. So these entities, coming back to the entities, you mention in your book that the Gnostics called them archons, and
Hmm.
the Mexican Toltecs called them flyers, Christians called them demons, and the Muslims called them jinn. And Carlos Castaneda talked about the flyers with
Yes,
Don Juan Matos, and said that we have a predator and it gave us its mind.
exactly, and that's what they are. They're
Yeah.
predators, and they give us their minds, and they push our personalities out of the way, and then take over.
So where
So
are they?
this,
In another dimension?
They're in another dimension. They're all around you all the time.
Hmm.
but do you think, Jerry, because of the let's say technology that's going on at the moment, that it's opening up or widening those dimensions so they can move around more freely? Like,
Well, as far as the mainstream media is concerned, I mean, they're infested with these things.
mm,
You know, they here in the U.S., the mainstream media has been pretty much cut off. Nobody's listening to them anymore. You know,
Hmm.
isn't that amazing?
that is absolutely amazing. People have figured it out.
Yeah.
You know, MSN has been flushed down the toilet. They went bankrupt. CNN, the Communist News Network, has laid off hundreds of people.
Hmm.
You know, so nobody's getting their news there anymore except people who are ignorant. You know, they the way they got it set up is you go to work, you come back, you're dead tired, you eat your dinner, you want to relax, turn on the news, see what's going on, and then you repeat it the next day. So you're brainwashed every day by these things. If you don't get your feedback from some other source than the mainstream media, you're brainwashed
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And depressed.
and depressed and fearful,
Yeah.
you know, and negative. You know,
Yeah.
it's all negative. Look how much negative news come. Nothing positive comes over the mainstream news. It's all negative.
No.
Yeah.
Um, Rudolf Steiner regarded electricity as demonic. Yeah. Um, and it seems to me, I mean, I've heard a lot of stories about weird, weird things happening after an antenna was installed, or somebody was exposed to an antenna. So I've heard of people who see what Castaneda called the flyers, or the Toltecs called the flyers. They see them in their peripheral vision, like
Hmm.
very tall, dark, black shapes, sort of, human sort of shapes, but very tall. And they're jumping about in their peripheral vision. But when they turn to look, they're not there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've heard several of these stories. Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
I've heard hundreds of those stories. They call them the shadow people.
Yeah, but in connection with the so-called telecommunications, electromagnetic radiation, and the installation of
Mm.
these antennas.
Well, I think they're independent of those. Schizophrenics, it's common for them to see them. They call them the shadow people. They're three-dimensional shadows that are darker than the rest of the room. Eh,
Mm.
Yeah,
It's common for meth addicts to see them. Okay? Um, I don't think they're good things. They very seldom, if ever, talk. If they see their eyes, they're that I actually use that as a clinical indicator. If the schizophrenic or the meth addict saw the eyes of the shadow people, they were in much worse shape than those who didn't. and the eyes were always lime green or red.
Mm.
Oh.
Okay. Now I've seen them out of my peripheral vision, but these guys can see them straight on. I mean,
Oh.
they walk through walls. They usually stand at the foot of the bed at night. They hardly ever speak. Matter of fact, before I met this one guy, the last 10 years I worked for somebody else. I was working psych crisis in hospital emergency rooms. Okay. Um, and I worked in a prison psychology department before that. And what fascinated me was there was one day where one prisoner talked to me about an experiment. He was a meth addict. He was talking to me about an experiment he was running to see what he could find out about these shadow people. Because his friends were using meth, he was using meth. When they were on meth, they could see the shadow people. When they were off the meth, they couldn't see them. Okay. So the meth somehow speeded things up. So one day this guy decided, well, I want to see if they're only can be seen by one person independently, or can two people using meth also see them? So what he did is they got their needles with meth. They drove out to an Indian reservation way out in the middle of the desert down a dirt road, and they parked. And one guy shot up with the meth, and he started seeing the shadow people. The other guy remained sober. Okay. So he would ask this other guy, "Hey, there's one over near the cactus over there. You see him?" "No, I don't see him." "How about over near that rock? There's another one over there. Do you see him?" "No." So they determined that they had to have the meth to see them. Okay. But that's not in all cases. I mean, like schizophrenics see them without the meth. Um, some normal people see them without the meth. Okay. So the second guy shot up, and then they started comparing where they saw them. You know, here's one over by the tree there. You see him? "Yeah, I see him." "What's he doing?" "Well, he's standing there, due to not moving." So, they found out that they were both seeing the same shadow people. So they came to the conclusion is no, we're both seeing the same ones. So it must be there. We're both seeing it. Now, one thing the prisoners told me, which was interesting, is that if the shadow people know you see them and you're looking at them, they will start moving toward you. And inmate after inmate after inmate told me that. And not one of these prisoners stayed around long enough to find out what would happen if they stood there and waited for that thing to get there. They all took off. Not one stayed there. So this same phenomena was going on with these two guys as they were pointing out the different shadows and saying, "Okay, do you see them over there?" All of these shadow people started moving in and out of the desert and surrounded them. And as they were watching them, they were closing in on them. So they freaked out. They got in the truck. They locked the doors, rolled up the windows, and they were watching them from inside the truck. Okay? And then the fellow said, well, at one point, the back of the truck went down like somebody had dropped a 10-ton boulder in it, and the front recoiled up. And, we looked in the back of the truck, and the whole back of the truck was filled with these shadow people. Now, that
Who
got
had
my...
weight? So they had weight.
They apparently had weight, or they caused that truck to jump. Now that got my attention too, because I figured, well, they're non-physical. There's nothing they could do to hurt you. I mean, they can't do anything to physical reality. They can't manipulate it. But when that guy told me that, it got my attention. I said, well, if they could do that, what else could they do? So I put that in the back of my mind, and I went, I'll keep an eye on that one. Okay. So I asked him, well, what did you guys do? He said, well, we started the truck and we drove out of there as fast as we could. We almost wrecked the truck getting out of there. And I asked him, did they follow you? And he said, no, they didn't. Okay.
Wow.
The second story I got from, this guy came into the ER on Christmas Eve, probably 15, 20 years ago. And it was a quiet night. It's Christmas Eve. I hated being there because I got drawn to, man the ER that night. This guy came in and he was shaking like a leaf. He couldn't stop shaking. So I pulled him into the office and started doing the psych eval on him. And he had been injecting meth for 10 years. And that got my attention. I'm thinking, well, you should have been dead 5 years ago. What are you still doing alive? So I asked him, do you see the shadow people? He says, yeah, I see them all the time. Then the second question was, do you see their eyes? He said, oh, yeah, I see their eyes. I said, what color are they? He said, they're lime green. Okay. So the most common one is red. Okay. And for some reason, I asked him, have they ever talked to you? Because I figured if they ever talked to anybody, they would have talked to this guy. And he said, oh, yeah, they talked to me. And I said, you know, what did they sound like? And he mimicked this, like to me, it reminded me of screeching your fingers on a blackboard. You know, it was this high pitched, squealy sound that he said that's what they sounded like. And it just that description sent shivers up my back just for that. And then I asked him, well, what did they tell you? And all of a sudden, his eyes turned completely black. He stopped shivering. He went stark still. And this something was looking out of his eyes that wasn't him. His eyes were complete. And I felt this deep, hard, cold hatred. I mean, it was the strongest cold hatred I've ever felt in my life. You know, and I've worked with a lot of prisoners. I've worked with a lot of crazy people. This was the strongest, coldest hatred I've ever experienced in my life. And he went completely calm, and I'm looking in the eyes of this thing because over the years I've trained myself not to show fear in the face of these guys because it's like running from a mad dog. You don't want to show fear. So I'm sitting there looking this thing in the eye and just looking at these dark eyes with this cold hatred. And it was palpable. I could feel it. And then, boom, after like 20 seconds, the eyes disappeared and he went back to the way he was, shaking like a leaf, and the original person was back again. You know? And I'm like, whoa, you know, it took me back. And then I asked him again, what did they tell you? And he said, they told me to go jump in front of a car out on the road. And I said, well, what'd you do? He said, well, I went and jumped in front of a car. They told me I wouldn't get hurt. I jumped in front of the car. I got hit. I got thrown off to the side of the road. He said, when I woke up, I was surrounded by these shadow people that were looking down on me. And they told me to get up, that I wasn't hurt. And he said, I got up and I wasn't hurt.
Wow.
And then I went to ask him another question, and that thing came back again. His eyes turned dark. He stopped shaking again, and he was just it was just staring at me again. And again, it was that deep, dark, cold hatred. So it didn't want me talking to this guy. You know. So it lasted another 15 or 20 seconds, and I go, okay, I've had enough. I don't want to provoke this thing anymore. So I wrote him up to have him admitted to the psych ward because he was out of it, and I sensed he was dangerous. The psych nurse came and took him for an interview. About 2 minutes later, she came back to my office and said, "What did you get out of him? I can't stand being around him. You know, I'm going to write my report based on your findings." So that was interesting. So that's the first time that I'd had any kind of interaction with something like that, and I'm still not sure what that was, but it scared the crap out of me. I mean, it was
Well, it
frightening.
sounds like they were inhabiting him, no?
Yes,
They
yeah,
weren't outside
they-
something that he was seeing, but they were actually inside him by that point.
yes,
Well, his energy would have been opened up from the drugs, you know, so they can come in, they can enter and leave. They don't necessarily have to stay.
right. And meth is a very dangerous drug. I've seen more prisoners go psychotic on amphetamine than any other drug. It's like it opens up their doors and invites these things in.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
virtually everybody who uses meth sees shadow people.
Mm.
I noticed that Sherry Swiney, who co-wrote the book with you, She said that laughing at them, mocking them, is really effective for getting rid of them.
Yeah, they don't like that. They want you to be afraid of them. You know,
Yeah.
they want you uh, to fear and do what they say because of that fear. But
Mm.
you know, they also will take repercussions against you. You know, if you mock them or laugh at, they'll try to make things worse. But they hate being mocked and made fun of. You know, they
Mm.
want to be taken seriously. And I remember this one prisoner who was hearing voices all the time, but he was mocking them and making fun of them. And, you know, on the surface, he looked perfectly normal. You know, you could not tell he was schizophrenic except when he was mocking and making fun of the voices. You know, they hate to be mocked.
Mm. The only encounter I've had with the flyers was once in a dream, and I invoked Jesus' name,
They
um,
hate that
which
too.
was which was very difficult to do because I couldn't actually say it. You know, I was trying to say it, and it wouldn't come out, and it wouldn't come out, and eventually I said it, and instantly I was awake, and they were gone.
Yeah, that's one of the things I saw working at the in the big psychiatric hospital is first of all, the first pattern I saw is that these things were negative. They were consistently negative. They never said anything good. It was always they were always mocking the patient or telling him rotten things. Um, and here's the psychiatric mafia saying that these things are auditory hallucinations. But that was a consistent pattern. It was the first consistent pattern I saw. They were consistently negative. What held them on that negative trajectory all the time? How come they weren't random like other hallucinations? You know, and I've seen people. I've worked in hospitals for decades. I've seen people with hallucinations. Those hallucinations are random. They're all over the place. You know,
Mm.
they're not predictable. You never know what's going to come out or what they're going to see. It's
Mm.
very predictable that the voices are going to be negative. Okay.
Yeah.
The next question was what holds them on such a negative trajectory? Why aren't they random like all other hallucinations? The second major pattern I saw is that they were anti-religion.
Mm.
They did not want the person going to church. They did not want them reading the Bible. They did not want them talking to preachers. You know, they did not want them talking to Jesus or praying. Now, why would a hallucination be anti-religious?
Mm.
Yes, quite. Yeah.
But that was consistent. Yeah, and
Mm.
I did kind of a little study on that and found that if the voices were weak and the person went to church, because these guys sense that there's something spiritually wrong, and a lot of them seek to go to church to see what the church can do about it. So if the voices are weak and they go to church, they shut up in the church. If they're of moderate strength, they get louder and they try to drown out the preacher. So the person can't hear what the lecture the preacher is giving. Okay.
Mm.
If they're very strong, the person will get up and be driven out of the church. They will get up and run out of the church. You know,
Mm.
Do you think that's why, Jerry, so many people are returning to the church at the moment? Because they have a sense that the church is going to help them?
I think that may be part of it because these guys had that sense,
Mm.
you know, and they saw that these entities did not like the Bible or Jesus or God or anything like that. And you know, what they said to a few of them was when they started reading the Bible, they said, matter of fact, it gets a little tricky there because you get to that part where this guy begat this guy, begat this guy, begat this guy. And then in the Old Testament, there's a part where this is what you do to these sacrifices on the altar, this burnt meat stuff. And
Mm.
it gets pretty boring. And um, these things come in and they go, this is garbage. Why are you reading it? You know, Jesus couldn't even save himself. What makes you think he's going to save you? I've heard that more than once
Yeah.
from them telling the patient that stuff. So they are conscious entities. They are aware. They see through their victim's eyes. You know, they can understand what the victim is thinking. And so they insert thoughts into the person's thought stream, and a lot of them are negative thoughts. So that's where the paranoia comes from. They tell the person, "Oh, that guy's going to get you," or "that guy's going to steal from you," or that something bad is going to happen. They insert these thoughts that generates the paranoia, and that generates the negative emotion that they feel off of. So one thing, if you don't believe me, ask them yourself. After the voices come, schizophrenics have no energy left. They're drained. All right. I
So
noticed
it's
that.
loose. These
That's
predators
loose, exactly.
are feeding off our energy.
That's exactly right. But they have to turn it negative first.
Yeah.
They can't just feed off it regularly. It has to be negative energy. That's what they feed off of. They can't stand positive energy. They can't stand positive spiritual energy. They can't stand church. They can't stand prayer. It's just they drain the person.
Yeah. Don't you both think that the level of evil that's abroad in the world seems to be extraordinary at the moment? And it's really, it's really perceptible to all of us,
Yeah, it's always been there. We're just seeing it now. It's just coming out now.
So
We're
why
being
is that?
allowed to see it.
Why is that?
Well, I heard the frequency of the planet is increasing.
Okay.
Mm.
You
Yeah,
know,
we're able to see beyond the veil, if you like. So if you're looking into, let's say, 4D, which is the psychic energetic dimension, then the average person is starting to be able to perceive that rather than just being in 3D, black and white, no in between, because they live in the in between world, so to speak. So yeah. The thing that I find difficult though, Jerry, is I did a lot of work with people who were abused by priests in the church. I did a lot of work in Ireland and different places where they're highly religious. And for me, that's a big,
huge betrayal.
yeah, I just find it really hard to go into a church, to be honest with you. I love the idea of community coming together, praying together, singing together, all of that. I just love it. But when I see these priests up there who never get married, so they don't know anything about relationships, they don't have children, preaching about relationship and love and everything, well, who are they loving? They say they're loving God, but you're living in the physical world. God gave us each other as a gift of company and enjoyment and to procreate and all of this. So for me, religion is a really hard thing to get through. And I was, Catholic girl. I went to church every day and everything like that. And then I saw what was happening with my friends and things when I was younger, which probably is the reason why I went into the work that I did.
And then they protect those people.
Yeah.
They won't get rid of them. They'll move them to another church.
They do. Yeah, I know that. And I actually went to, there's a little island off island that is run by nuns. It's a monastery run by nuns. And it's for priests to go to receive forgiveness from the nuns for the abuse that they do on children. It's dedicated to the priests. I've worked with nuns and priests as well. And so for me, it's very difficult. When people and the priest saying to me, I don't know what to do. I'm in between because I love God and I love the church, but what I'm witnessing is so abhorrent that I can't deal with it. So it's this thing. And then you have people who have adored the church all their lives, but then they suddenly confess they were abused and they can't understand why God would let that happen. So I have a really hard time with the religion thing for that reason, even though I know lots of people find comfort from it.
These demons, if they can take down a priest, that's like a bullseye. That's like winning the lottery.
Mm. And I also found that the children, well, they're now adults, I mostly work with adults. Very rarely did I work with children, but I found that each one of those adults that I worked with had a gift. And especially if they had demonic entities attached to them, they had a gift of healing. They had a gift of insight. They had gifts. And those demons would drain the gift. And I felt that they were deliberately targeted because of that gift. It was like the gift was harnessed. And I think if once they kind of learned to direct the gift, it helped a lot too, as well as, you know, releasing them from these energies, but also learning to direct their own energy really helped.
Yeah, in Africa, a lot of the tribes will take a schizophrenic who's hearing voices and work with them. And they become the shamans because they already know, they've already experienced the spiritual world. They know it directly. They've been there, you know. So what I've seen for the most part, the positive don't speak in words unless you're on the verge of death. They speak more in feelings, intuition, and serendipity. You
Yeah.
know? And you know, working in the emergency room, uh, there are people who came in that I evaluated that should have, by all rational purposes, been dead. They should not have survived. You know, um, the one that sticks out there was this one woman who was having lots of trouble. I mean, she got divorced, she lost her job, she was about to lose her apartment, she had a teenage kid, everything in her life was going wrong. So she went, I'm done. She didn't want to mutilate her body or shoot herself or cut her wrist or anything like that, but she wanted to be done. So she decided I'm going to kill myself, and she got alcohol, she got drugs. She drove out to a railroad track in a small town in southern Arizona, and she waited by that track for the train to come. Right? And she was talking to her sister on the phone in San Diego, telling her sister goodbye. And she saw the train coming. She hung up. She waited till it got close. She drove her car right on the train track and she stopped. That train plowed into her car, picked it up, and threw it into the second track on the other side. Another train came by and hit it a second time. So she's hit by two trains. It threw it like 50 yards off the road, and she was trapped in it. She could not get out. They they had to get that jaws of life thing and cut her out. You know? And here she was sitting in front of me, you know, like 3 hours later, and all she had was a black eye.
Oh, goodness.
Amazing.
And I'm like, what's with that? You know, you should have been dead. So right away, I'm like, what happened there? So I started asking her questions. I'm like, what did you think after being hit by two trains and you're still sitting alive in your car? And she said, I was furious. I did not want to be here. I was angry. She said, I was absolutely furious. And you know, I said, well, after you got kind of over that, you know, what were you thinking? And she said, I felt this absolute peace come over me. You know, she said it was just absolute peace, of absolute calmness, and it said just three words: everything is going to be okay. You know, everything's going to be all right. And she believed it. You know, and it was like um, everything was fine from there. You know, it was like it changed her, and I didn't think psychiatry would let her out because they had to sign off on everything. So I submitted my report and I said, well, what she did was deadly. I don't feel she's suicidal anymore. You know, I don't see I don't see it there. And I thought for sure they weren't going to let her out, but then, no, they let her out. You know?
Wow.
So it was thing after thing after thing like that, where spirit was in operation, but it wasn't through words. Okay. One guy had a 350 Magnum pistol, revolver, all the cylinders loaded. This is a very powerful pistol. It just would have blown his head right off his shoulders. He puts it to his head and it goes click, puts it to the ground, bang, click, bang. And he goes, okay, I got it. What are
Yeah.
the chances of 2 rounds misfiring one after another?
Yeah.
Another guy, 45 pistol, that another big pistol, puts it to his head, click, didn't fire. He takes it out to the range the next day, puts that same round in, pulls the trigger, and it goes off. You know, there were thing after thing after thing like that. They were so common that I only remember a handful of them. I should have wrote them all down. I mean, I
Yeah.
think they would have made a good book. But
But haven't we all found miracles in our lives?
I think so.
Yeah. Because
So, you know,
me,
they,
since I started campaigning, so
but
many
the,
weird things have happened to me that
right, but
it's brought me to the point now where I totally believe in the divine plan. I think that
yes.
everything is happening is perfect because it's taking us to where we need to be.
Yeah, and it's more serendipity and things that happen. When things start going bad all the time, you're on the wrong track.
Yes,
You know, when you
absolutely.
when you're on the right
I
track, things just go your way.
Yeah, I finally understood that, I'm a woman of a certain age at this point, so I've had a lot of experiences. And I've realized that the way to go through life is not to push, but to be open, to be magnetic, So if something's not working, if something's not happening, I'm wanting something to happen, but it's not happening, even with small things. If something's not working, I go, oh, okay, fine. And then I go in a different direction, And the spirit world shows you what is the right thing to do and what's not, And I'm very philosophical about things these days. I don't get upset about things. I don't feel that things have to happen the way I want them to happen. I'm just accepting of the way things are, which is why, I actually feel extremely positive, even though this whole world situation now, which is effectively a takeover of the planet, a genocide, it's, weapons, electromagnetic weapons trained on us, directed energy weapons, all these antennas, they're all weapons. I mean, with what I know about what's going on, it's cosmic, it couldn't possibly be worse. I keep saying that, and then I keep hearing something worse. But I totally believe that we're going to somewhere beautiful because everything that's happening, the destruction of our faith in the health service, for example, that's taking us to self-help, to using natural methods again, to educating ourselves about how to look after our bodies. The destruction of the faith in education is leading people to homeschool, to find alternative means of educating their children. So much of what is happening is actually educating us and teaching us to be autonomous, to be more confident, to be sovereign. It's I think everything is very positive. I think despite everything that's happening, I think I can say I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. Strangely, paradoxically.
Yeah, I think God is in control.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
he's working it. You know, but
Absolutely.
you look at how much faith we have put into the medical system, and then you look at what they've done with
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
garbage that has been fostered upon all of us. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, it's
and
basically with the medical system, well, like much else, it's about materialism,
it's about materialism. It's about
Um,
money. It's about
yeah,
material. You know,
to me, it always comes back to materialism. The problem with electromagnetic radiation is that nobody can touch it. So they don't they don't realize
they don't worry
how
about it.
dangerous it is, They
Yeah.
think that it's a material world that we're living in, but we're absolutely not. And quantum physics has shown us this.
Hmm.
We should already be in a different paradigm because of what we know about quantum physics. And quantum physics has shown to the Western mind what the Eastern mystics have known for thousands of years. But nothing has really changed. You know, it hasn't worked its way into our everyday lives, but it will soon.
Yeah, I think it's on its way.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
That double slot experiment where with the quantum entanglement, where
Yeah.
they get an atom and they take an electron from that atom and they separate them by miles. What they do to one electron happens automatically to the other one.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
so
It's incredible.
and also with the um, prediction, it's like this they started shooting electrons through a slot, okay, and they formed a certain pattern. Okay, however, when somebody come and look at actually watches the electrons, that pattern changed to a waveform. All right, so then they went, okay, we'll trick it. We'll put a camera there, so nobody physical would be watching it and see what happens. It turned into a waveform.
Yeah.
You know, if a conscious entity was watching what was going on, the behavior of that electron changed from a
Yeah.
particle to a wave.
Yeah. And what makes me laugh is they call that the observer effect, when in
Yes.
fact it should be called the participant effect.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You're participating in the creation of your universe.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm actually witnessing that a lot lately. I mean, it really is coming to me, you know. You create your own reality. You
Yes.
have free will. Start using it.
Yeah. It's all about consent. You know, I
Yeah.
believe we are always in control. So even when it comes to these demons, uh,
Mm.
somehow people have given their consent, by
Oh,
perhaps taking drugs or,
watching
excessive
porn.
alcohol or whatever. Somehow they've given consent to these things, but we can take back our power and we can stop getting that consent. Don't you think so, Jerry?
Well, past a certain point, when these things get in there, they don't want to go anywhere. They want to stay there. They figured that body is theirs. That belongs to them.
But
And
at that point,
the
the,
original
the
personalities in the way. They want to push them out of the way.
yeah, but at that point, the person is so weakened, it would be really difficult to take control again,
Right.
take back your
Right.
power. Yeah.
Yes.
But ultimately, I really believe that we have the power, that we should be in control.
Right. And they don't want us to know that.
Yeah. This whole conspiracy,
This whole
coming back
conspiracy.
to, what's going on in the world at the moment,
Right.
this whole conspiracy is about hiding that from us. But
Yes.
we
They don't
are,
they don't want us to know how powerful we really are.
yeah, yeah. So as soon as we stop consenting tacitly because we're tricked all the time, as soon as we stop consenting and start saying no, then all of these things stop.
And I think that's what's happening in the US right now with Trump getting in there. It's like the US people have said no, and they still tried to cheat on the elections very hard. They were cheating in a lot of different places, but people were so awake because they tuned out the mainstream media and were no longer being brainwashed with them, and they were getting their information from other sources, that were telling them the truth. And you can sense when somebody's telling you the truth. After you're being lied to for generation after generation after generation. I remember my dad being glued to CNN all the time, soaking in their lies like that was the truth. Once that started becoming unmasked, people started waking up. And there was a mass rebellion here in the US. They stole the 2020 election. I mean, they
Yeah.
stole it clean. They tried to steal this one, but it was the people were so awake that they just massively, even though they were cheating to a large degree, they'd taken over New York, they'd taken over California, they took over Arizona. All those elections were stolen. You know, but the rest of the country made up for it.
Yeah.
But
So
do you think that that's happening because of these cosmic energies that are coming in that are pushing us a little bit to disconnect from those old thinking, those old frequencies?
Yeah,
And maybe,
I think the uptick in frequency is
yeah,
definitely doing that, and
because
people are resonating with that.
I'm finding, and what's interesting to me, I find here that there's a lot of people that you would call tradesmen, plumbers,
Hmm.
electricians, this sparkies, they didn't go for any of the bullshit. But the
Oh, that's
people
good.
who work in an office, the lawyers, the doctors, all went for it.
Yeah,
So I'm thinking, what's the difference between these two people? A highly educated, they're both educated. I'm not going to say they're not. But what I'm saying is one's working with their hands, with the land. They're not in their head all the time. And they're the ones that are more connected to themselves. The ones
Yeah.
working in an office in a heavy electromagnetic field, Claire, are the ones that were easily brainwashed.
Yeah, but they're also corporate. You see, it's interesting you
Yeah.
should say this because I've noticed the same thing.
Did you?
All the sole traders, your
Mhm.
electrician or your plumber or whatever, they
Oh, I'm
work
all
for
right.
themselves. They don't work for some big corporation. And so they
right.
have to think for themselves. They have to be empowered and independent and autonomous. And so they're
Mhm.
not entrained, hypnotized the way the rest of the population is. Yeah. They tend to be the most informed and sort of intelligent people.
Yeah, they are. It's amazing. It's
Yeah, no,
amazing.
I saw the same thing over here.
Did you?
Like all the doctors and the nurses, so they all completely believed in this bull crap.
Mhm.
That they stood behind it. Yeah, I was the only one in Walmart one day that wasn't wearing a mask.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I've been in that situation many
I got
times.
thrown out of Costco.
Yeah, we
Um,
had the same
I
thing.
walked out of a doctor's office on an appointment. I said, "Do you want the business or you want me to wear a mask?" And they said, "You need to wear a mask." I said, "Okay, I'm gone."
It's yeah, I never wore a mask ever. I mean, it's inconceivable to inhibit my breathing, I
I,
need to
kn-
breathe.
I know, I knew that that's what they want. They want you to be smothered. They want you to feel panicked.
Yes.
Despite the fact that, these masks are breeding bacteria,
Hmm.
Yes.
they're going to make you sicker. They're cutting off your air supply and they're breeding stuff that's going to make you sick.
Yeah, well,
And
in the so-called Spanish flu, most people died of secondary lung infections from wearing masks. So this playbook has happened before,
yeah, yeah.
They're not creative, these demons, they always use the same playbook.
Well, that's the same thing with these patterns.
Mm,
Yeah.
They run the same patterns over and over and over again. If
yes.
you go to my website at jerrymarzinsky.com, then go to articles and pull up the That's a Lie program and the patterns that these things run. Okay.
Mm.
Um, you'll
I
see
read
that,
through that, Jerry. It's very good. It's very informative for people to check out your website and read that,
yeah,
because I think it will, maybe people are experiencing these things but not really aware of it, and it will,
yes.
so you also give, well, with That's a Lie, how to resist it, how to help yourself.
Well, that's one thing. Sherry, my co-author, when we
Mm.
wrote this book. Now, I had known her for 10 years before she admitted to me that she was hearing voices as a young child in when she was in a Catholic school.
Yeah, I did
You
the
know,
same. Yeah.
yeah. And I couldn't believe it because she was one of the most spiritual people I know, and
Hmm.
she withheld that from me for 10 years, and she was working on a prison reform program, and she had one of the biggest ones in the U.S. So I contacted her and I said, "Well, I'm in the prison. I'd like to help you." I couldn't attack my prison system because I worked for them, but she was attacking the Alabama prison system here in the U.S., and they were Neanderthals. The Alabama prison system is just uh, it's in the Stone Age. The the gangs, the work gangs with the chains, and I mean just the kind of classical stuff you see on TV. So I was at that time I was picking through the heads of schizophrenic patients that I was working with in the prison, and I was telling her about one of these guys once. I said his voice is did this. And that surprised me. She goes, oh, I know all about those. I said, well, how do you know all about those? And she said, well, I was hearing them when I was a young woman. You know,
Mm.
they almost killed me.
Yeah, I had the same thing, Jerry. I was
Yeah.
traumatized terribly as a child with the demons and things. Yeah.
Yeah, and so was Sherry.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
you know, I found it hard to believe that she had been plagued with those. So I started asking her question after question that only somebody who had heard the voices and experienced them would know the answers to. And she was
Mm.
like, bang, 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 just every single question, bullseye. I knew she had been there, you know. So after
Yeah.
we talked about this for a while, and once I knew that, I would, you know, I would consult her. I said, well, I'm seeing this happen now. This is pretty strange. What do you think? And she would give me her take on it. So I was seeing hundreds of schizophrenics, and she was the one who was talking to me about. She's the one who'd been there and recovered. Okay,
Yeah.
and she was willing to be honest with me about what she saw going on. Okay, so
Mm.
she said she recovered using the That's a Lie program. That's also on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com, and it works
Yeah, I
for
saw that.
everybody. It
Yeah.
works
It's
for everybody.
fantastic. It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
So these voices are liars. They're consummate liars. They lie about everything. You know, all they care about is generating that negative emotional energy, that loose that they feed off of, and they will tell you every lie under the in creation in order to get you to generate that negative emotion. You know,
But
there's
I,
nothing beyond them as far as lying. They're
yeah,
consummate liars.
but
So
I
if
would say,
if you realize they're liars, then they can't get you. If you
that's
realize they're
exactly
lying,
it.
they can't get their claws in you.
That's right. But I would say, Jerry, you would recognize that your friend Sherry has a very strong mind now,
Yes.
having gone through that. It's the same for me. That's the same for me. I have my mind is very like, you know, yeah. But they do lie. And as soon as I would say, like, oh, like this go away sort of thing, they go because they know I can see them. I can perceive them. And the more that you can see them clearly, the weaker they become. And I
Yeah.
think that's what's happening. That's going to start happening. The more people that's why these conversations are important, because the more that the average person understands this, they can recognize it's happening in their life when they go and they look at your beautiful list and they go, okay, this is happening, this is happening. And then they go to It's a Lie, and they've got some support for themselves when they recognize it, because not everybody is completely plagued by it. Some
Right.
people, it's just they're just brushed by it, you know. And it's like that when I spoke earlier about the initiations that people naturally go through. A lot of those initiations are done through those demonic forces. And the God force is watching it all, going, okay, let's see, are they going to get through this or not?
Yeah, that's a good point. If you have to keep your attention on what's coming into your mind.
Yeah.
Okay. So take a step back and go, oh, I just had that thought. How do you feel about it? You know, like you're the observer because you are
Yeah.
not your thoughts. You know,
Yeah.
you're the one who's experiencing those thoughts. They're coming in from outside.
Yeah.
If you observe them and don't think they are you, then you can make better decisions about them. You
Yeah.
know, there was one time I was out here in Arizona. We don't have lawns for the most part. We have cactus. We go out with a machete and cut down the cactus to keep it from overrunning us. And I was out in the backyard with I have a pure white husky, beautiful husky,
Oh,
and she was
beautiful.
out there with me running around, and I was cutting the cactus with a machete, and she runs by, and here's this voice that's screams in my head, chop her head off. And I'm like, I have the machete in my hand,
Mm.
and here's this thought booming through my mind, and I'm like, I'm like traumatized. It was like horrific that I would even have such a thought come in,
Mm.
and it shocked me, and it was like I knew where it came from, but it was still upsetting. So they got their feeding from that one thought because I was upset that I even had such a thought.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of us get those thoughts. We would never do those things, but it was upsetting to think about them. I had one guy write me, said, "Oh, what you say about the voices suggesting stuff, I found it absolutely true. I was standing behind my boss the other day, and this voice came into my head and said, 'Spit on him.'"
Wow.
That was from the guy who was in the UK.
Wow.
Oh gosh, that's a bit funny. Sorry, I'm going to lose it over that one. Oh, dear.
You know, there was another one that wrote me. He goes, "See, what's hard about it is that we believe that all thoughts that we experience are from us, that we create them. They're in our head, so they belong to us." But one of the most difficult things that a schizophrenic has to go through is to understand that those voices are not who they are.
Mm.
They are a separate thing. They're a separate entity. And I've had prisoner after prisoner ask the voices, "Who are you? What are you?" And they would respond back, "We are you." They want the person to
Lions.
believe that their voices in that they're hearing in their heads from these entities are who they are. And if you believe that, you become them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm.
But that would be the same for depression, you know,
Yes. Yeah.
because I've noticed, probably you have too, I mean, we all notice how many anxious, depressed young people, you know, it's just shocking. Like I was just saying yesterday that a friend of mine's son, who at the time was 14, when they went back to school after COVID, you know, they shut the schools down. This young boy had 5 boys in his year commit suicide in the space of 4 months. 14.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Well, you look at the suicide rate in the U.S. right now. 50,000 people a year kill themselves in the United States, and a good many of them on antidepressant drugs and antipsychotic drugs already. We've got more drugs, more psychiatric drugs on the planet than we've ever had in the history of mankind. We got more psychologists, we got more psychiatrists, and this is what we're getting. And the suicide rate is increasing. It's getting worse every single year.
And
You know,
now governments want to offer euthanasia so that you can just
yeah, yeah,
quit.
okay. Hey, we'll help you kill yourself,
Yeah.
you know? And at the same time, you know, global antipsychotic sales have soared to 14.54 billion. This is in 2021, and they were estimated to soar to 15.5 billion in 2022. We're talking about billion, not million, billion. You know, antidepressant market is expected to reach 15.98 billion by 2023. These guys are making a fortune off of these toxic drugs. And
Well,
all
when
of
I
them
was
had
at the
these
UN, Jerry,
pages.
when I was at the UN, I was an editor, yeah, and one of the things I had to edit was the World Drug Report, yeah, and about precursors and psychotropic drugs and this sort of thing, you know, and the publication was mainly just tables and tables and tables of precursors and drugs that were being shipped into the various countries. And in terms of the US, I looked through and it was however many tons of this and that and something else, and that represented so many million doses. And I thought, my goodness, you know, there can't be anybody left in the US who's not being drugged. Just the
That's their
sheer
that's their
amazing
plan. That's
quantity.
their plan. In the U.S., not unlike in the UK, in the U.S. they're running drug commercials on the TV all the
Yeah,
time, and a
yeah.
lot of the times they go, uh, they show these people laughing and dancing and stuff, and they go, "Ask your doctor about, you know, Zyprexa or some weirdo name that they make up for the drug. You don't even know what it's for."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's drug commercial after drug commercial after drug commercial. The pharmaceutical industry is so powerful in the U.S. that they bought off most of Congress
Mm-hmm.
to pass laws that help them with their business.
Yeah.
You know, the the medical industry in the U.S. was taken over back in the 30s by the Standard Oil guy. Who was it?
Rockefeller.
Rockefeller. They're
Yeah,
taken over by
absolutely.
Rockefeller, and what was it? The
Absolutely.
Flexner report. They
Yeah.
paid for this damning report, saying that whatever's going on, the treatment that they have now is banned. It's illegal. Okay.
Yeah.
Now the university had to teach pharmacological medicine. Otherwise, they couldn't graduate doctors. All
Yeah.
right. So naturopathy was out. The Tesla violet ray was out. Acupuncture was out. It was all illegal. All the
Yeah.
natural cures
And
were
these are
illegal.
all called alternative therapies, when
Right.
actually the whole history of medicine, going back thousands of years, those were natural treatments
Was the
until this
foundation.
modern pharmaceutical era. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't want anything that is going to interfere with their cash flow.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
So they've taken over the government. You know,
Mhm.
and putting Robert Kennedy in there, scaring them to death. They're doing everything they can to keep him out because he will attack them. He'll attack all the poisons that they put in, the preservatives. I don't know about Britain, but boy, they are spraying the skies over here with
Oh
that,
yes,
that,
Britain is the
that
same. Every
powdered
country is
aluminum.
the same, Jerry.
Yeah,
I've been all around Western Europe and Scandinavia. In every country, it's the same chemtrails.
yep, yep. It's UN is doing it. I've seen it in Mexico where they sprayed it so heavy they blotted out the sun.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think
Oh, they
Mexico
blotted
has.
us. Yeah.
I think
We don't get
Mexico
the
has
sun.
banned it.
Yeah.
I think I
Yeah.
heard Mexico has banned the chemtrails in Mexico.
Well, I hope so. That would be nice. But I mean, between the pharmaceutical industry filling us full of poisons and, as you say, all these additives in foods, and then the chemtrailing, which is aluminium, barium, cesium, and all sorts of nonsense. I mean, it's a wonder that any of us are walking around functioning.
Yeah, but
Well,
we're getting sicker and sicker. So they make
Yes.
money off of us being sick, not from us
Yeah.
getting better.
Yeah.
And that's
but
the
then
same
let's,
way
Then, of course,
psychiatry is. Psychiatry does the same thing.
yeah.
They don't want people being cured from schizophrenia. In the
Yeah.
U.S., they've reduced the funding for a cure for schizophrenia down to a dribble. They
Ugh.
don't want a cure for schizophrenia. They want to make their billions of dollars selling drugs that cure nothing. None of these psychiatric drugs cure anything. They just treat symptoms.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then, of course, there's the toxin of electromagnetic radiation.
Yep.
And, this again is ubiquitous. Most people are spending probably 24 hours a day, I would have thought. Not only are they sitting in Wi-Fi during the daylight hours and in the evening, but then they're going to bed and taking their cell phones with them and
Mm-hmm.
switched on as alarm clocks or, apps or goodness knows
Mhm.
what. So, this is probably the most ubiquitous toxin at this point, and people aren't even aware of it.
No.
What strikes me, reading through your book, are the amazing parallels between people, schizophrenics hearing these demons, and people who are so-called electrohypersensitive. There's this term, it's actually a political term, because calling people who are suffering from the effects of exposure to electromagnetic radiation, calling them electrohypersensitive, points the finger at them. Oh, you're just hypersensitive. The rest of us are absolutely fine with this toxin, but you happen to be hypersensitive. And then if you're one of the people who's not hypersensitive, you can say, oh, well, that person has a problem, but I'm okay. I don't need to worry about it. Yeah. But actually, this is causing massive health problems. It's causing psychiatric problems. It's causing depression. It's making people suicidal. It's making people diabetic. I mean, it's interfering with every operation of the body because the whole body operates electrically. So it's interfering with absolutely everything. And yet, there is no effort to limit people's exposure, and there's no acknowledgement of the toxicity of this. This all rests on a huge lie, which is called the thermal hypothesis. I don't know if you're aware of this.
Mm-mm.
But this goes back to a German Nazi eugenicist who was brought into the US under Operation Paperclip. And the US Navy asked him to give them some guidelines on exposure to electromagnetic radiation for their military personnel. Yeah? Now, this man was a biophysicist, and he was studying the biological effects of exposure to electromagnetic radiation. And he said that there were no biological effects. And if you did not feel heating, then nothing was happening to you. You were not being harmed. This was a Nazi eugenicist. Before being brought into the United States, he was working at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for heredity, anthropology, and eugenics. He was a eugenicist, yeah? And he set these guidelines in 1953, which were then adopted by the US Navy. And basically, we are still living with those same guidelines, and we have been affected for now, 70 odd years by this so-called thermal hypothesis. If you're not being heated, it's not doing you any harm. Yeah? And yet there is so much research about the biological effects. It's absolutely black and white. The biological effects are massive, and as I said, affecting every part of the body. Yeah? So when somebody is affected by electromagnetic radiation, very often they are treated as if they are mentally ill. Imagine a couple, for example, where the husband is absolutely fine. They've got Wi-Fi in the home, they've got cell phones, whatever, there's an antenna outside. The husband's absolutely fine, and the wife is doubled up in agony. She's being tortured by it. So obviously he thinks that there's something seriously wrong with her mind, that she's perceiving something that he's not perceiving at all. And so, a lot of so-called electrohypersensitive people have actually been treated by psychiatrists. And it's they learn not to talk about it too much, despite what they're suffering, because the people around them don't believe it's happening. It's a little bit like schizophrenics.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a hidden thing, and voices in the head. There is actually a technology called voice to skull, which puts voices in people's heads. So I find a lot of parallels between what you've described in your book about what's happening to schizophrenics and what's happening to people being exposed to electromagnetic radiation. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, and they don't want that information out there. Just like, the psychiatric mafia doesn't want the dangers of their medications put out there. And very seldom have I seen a psychiatrist tell the patient all the dangerous side effects of the medications they're being put on. They'll tell them some of the most prominent that they're likely to feel, but they won't tell them, hey, with long-term usage, this stuff is going to rot out your brain. And then when they found that long-term patients in psychiatric hospitals had brains that looked like walnuts, shrunken walnuts, the big pharma goes, oh no, it's not due to our drugs. It's due to the schizophrenia. The schizophrenia did it. The researchers went, okay, well, let's see. So they started feeding those drugs to monkeys, rats, and whatever, and they found that their brains were shrunk also. Yeah. You think that's going to get in the mainstream? No. They won't let that out. Any journal article that's written about that, all of a sudden, they're not going to be funded. That university that prints that is not going to be funded by the big pharma. So they control these universities. They're still putting out that schizophrenia is caused by a biological imbalance in the person's brain. But you won't ever see, it's a complete lie. It was fabricated by Eli Lilly back in the 70s when they came out with Prozac. They needed something to look like they knew what was going on. So they made up that lie, and then they started this whole biological chemical imbalances, it causes all mental illnesses.
Yeah, just like the thermal hypothesis given out by Hermann P. Schwann,
Right. But you
about
watch psychiatrists,
radiation. It's
when a
incredible.
psychiatrist starts prescribing a medicine, you won't ever see them take a baseline to see what chemicals in the brain are out of balance or by how much. You won't ever see that happen because they don't have one.
Yeah.
They don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be, but yet they've got the whole world convinced that there's a chemical imbalance in the person's brain, even though that's been disproven over and over and over at this point. They're still
So has
selling
the
that
thermal
bull crap,
hypothesis, yeah.
to sell their drugs.
Yeah.
Now they change their wording a little bit. They go, well, it's believed or it's suspected that there's a chemical imbalance of the brain. But still, there is no baseline.
Yeah.
They have no baseline. You have to, if you got an imbalance to fix it, you have to have a baseline. What should it be? They have no idea.
Mm.
It's a lie fostered on the entire planet by the big pharma and the psychiatric mafia.
And people hold on to it because they need a solution.
Right.
They need an answer. So they go, right, that's the answer. Yeah, I had someone a few years ago that said, a friend of mine actually, that went on quite strong medication, Jerry, and antipsychotics. And I was very distressed over it. And I said, look, I'm your friend, but I'm going to tell you from a professional point of view what I think is going on, even though you haven't asked me, but I'm concerned, right? So I mentioned a few things, and she was like, yeah, that could be it. But, I'm just going to go with what the doctors say. And then I said, I'm telling you, there's nothing wrong with you. You don't have a chemical imbalance. What's wrong with you is you've got suppressed anger, a couple of other things, because I knew what was going on in her life. And I said, you need to get it out. You need to talk to someone. You need to do some processes and change a few things. Anyway, it was a few months later, she went and had a genetic testing done. And they found that there was nothing wrong with her and that she didn't have any indication that she would get that through her family lineage or anything. So she went off the meds and then came to me and said, you were right. It was that, and that. And my head just goes, because it's like, it's like you, Jerry, people know you've been working in this for years, but they don't want to hear it because they want a quick fix.
Mm-hmm.
They want to get a medication straight away that's going to settle everything in a few days or numbing them within 24 hours. They don't want to look at their issue. They don't want to take responsibility because it takes longer.
That's key. Take responsibility. It's all about taking responsibility is the answer. You have to take responsibility for yourself,
But it's also, Claire, getting them back into the corporate world as quickly as possible to make that money it's like getting them back into life, but they're not living.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let's look at solutions, because Jerry, in your book, you've got a list of solutions here, which I think is really fantastic. And I think that they also go for all the other areas of life that we're dealing with now, all this crisis out there. So can we talk about those?
Sure.
I have to find them. Hang on.
Well, that's what I love about what you're doing, Jerry, because you are giving solutions to people rather than just talking about a subject, exposing it all, but there's no solution at the end.
Well, I think one of the biggest ones about schizophrenia is when they start hearing these voices, they don't realize that it's not them, because we're taught to believe that every thought that we have in our head belongs to us. So here's this thought stream that's telling this person all these terrible things about themselves and to do terrible things to others, and they think it's them. And the voices are there going, yeah, it is you. You know, when they're asked, who are you? They say, we are you. You know,
Mhm.
so they
Mhm.
want the person to believe that those thoughts belong to them. And then if they believe that, then they become the voices. They become that negative entity.
Yeah.
So one of the
So,
biggest battles that they have to get through is the realization that those voices are not them. They're not coming from them. They are not who they are, and they don't belong to them. And that that that's a huge they and psychiatry is absolutely against that. They're telling them your brain is broken. You know, those voices are you. Your brain is broken. You know, the only solution for you is to take these drugs.
so your solutions, Jerry. I've picked out just some of them. And I really think they apply to all of us, you know, not just schizophrenics. Yeah. You say stay away from negative people, books, magazines, violent video games, murder TV shows, or anything with negative or violent content.
Yeah, that's one of the first thing I noticed with the schizophrenics I was working with at the state hospital. They were watching negative movies all the time, murder mysteries, murder stuff, war movies. Uh, they were reading negative books. That was always had a negative book there. These things feed off of negative energy.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're immersing yourself in these violent video games, I mean, and here the industry has society convinced that these violent video games are okay. They're not dangerous. There's nothing wrong. You know, and these violent shows on TV, I mean, virtually everything on TV is violent. So
Yeah.
by the time a teenager gets to be 16 years old, he's seen what, 10,000 murders on TV? And the TV is saying, oh, yeah, this is what you do when you're frustrated and angry and you need to solve a problem. You get a gun or a knife and you go kill somebody. And then they go, oh, it's the gun did that. We got to take away guns because guns are evil. A gun itself has never shot anybody. There was always somebody pulling the trigger,
Yeah.
you know. And then you look at the pathetic state of mental health on the planet right now, with
Yeah.
50,000 people killing themselves every year, year after year after year in the U.S. This pathetic mental health system that we have is totally dysfunctional. It's an
Yeah.
illusion.
Yes,
It's a
absolutely.
brainwashed scam.
Absolutely. And it has to go, you know.
It has to go.
So your another recommendation is listen to pleasant music, instrumental only. Stay clear of acid rock, rap music, or music with words.
Yeah, because they you know, when you get these crooners like in country and western music, it's like, oh, my girlfriend left me and all I got is alcohol now. You know,
Oh, the dog's
Very
died.
good,
yeah, it's
excellent.
like that kind of crap. It's depressing. I mean, it's like, yeah,
Yes.
everybody can relate to it because everybody's been dumped at some point, you know,
Yeah.
virtually. You know, but to listen to that over and over again, then that acid rock is like, yeah, kill this guy, kill that guy, you know, and it's almost subconscious.
Well,
You know,
I mean, you know,
these
we've
things
actually got
foster that stuff.
evidence for this. We've got evidence. You must know Masaru Emoto and his
Yes,
work on
yeah,
water,
with the
yeah?
water. Yeah,
With the water crystals, yeah?
yep.
So, the two worst crystals I saw, you know, looking at the images, were just to be clear for people listening, Emoto exposed water to different, I suppose you could call it emotions or prayer, either negative words or positive words. And according to the exposure, you would get crystals that would look like the most incredible snowflakes, or they would be completely distorted and brown and disgusting. And the two worst crystals I saw were from water that had been exposed to heavy metal music. It was so distorted and brown and revolting. But the absolute number one worst that I ever saw was from water exposed to cell phones.
Oh,
To
It was
what?
completely black
black.
So it's exposed to what?
to cell phones.
Cell phones.
Yeah,
Wow, I
it
didn't know
was
that.
horrific.
Yeah.
horrific. It was the worst I've
Wow.
ever seen. Yeah.
Wow.
I shall have to find it for you and send it to you, or maybe we'll try
Wow.
to add it to this video. Well, so yes, I mean, what Masaru Emoto has shown us all is that the body is between 70 and 90% water, and water is conductive, so it's carrying frequencies. So our emotions are having an effect on our bodies, and everything that we expose ourselves to is having an effect on our bodies. And so with our minds, it's really important to think positively and think pleasant thoughts and expose ourselves to pleasant ideas and pleasant people and pleasant experiences. And this is how we take control and actually change our complete life. I think all three of us would agree that we are creator beings. So
Right.
if you adopt these recommendations of yours, then I think you'll find that your life is actually a much happier and smoother one.
Right. And amplify the good things. When you
Yeah.
feel good or you get good news, amplify it.
Yeah.
Don't just let it get run over by all the negative stuff. Dwell on it for a while.
And also, don't panic about things. Even if things seem negative, as we discussed earlier, it's very often because you shouldn't be going in that direction. That's why it's not happening for you. So go in another direction, do something else, but don't take whatever it is as a complete disaster. As the old cliche has it, when one door closes, another door opens. And life is like that.
Yeah, and these negative entities, they love to dump gasoline on the fire. So
Yeah.
if something happened, they come along and go, "Yeah, it was your fault. You should have known better. How stupid could you be?" They just keep hammering you.
Yeah. And the other recommendation of yours, which I really like, is pray for protection every night before sleep and surround yourself with white light to keep down nightmares.
They hate the 23rd Psalm. I've had so many patients tell me when it started off at the state psychiatric hospital where I had one patient come in. He goes, "When I read the 23rd Psalm, the voices go crazy. They can't stand it."
Yeah.
He said they experienced the 23rd Psalm like worms thrown onto a hot frying pan.
Yeah.
They
Very
don't like
powerful.
it. Now, why would a hallucination react to the 23rd Psalm?
Yes, quite. Yeah, quite. And the other really, really important recommendation you make is, or the statement you make is, you have at least 2 guardian angels waiting to help you at all times, but you must specifically ask them to silence the voices. And I would add, specifically ask them for the help that you want, if it's
Right.
a different circumstance. Yeah.
Yeah, they're there. You have to ask them. They're not allowed to interfere with your free will like these negative entities
Yeah.
can. The negative
Yeah.
entities, they don't ask anything. They just barge in and do whatever they want.
Yeah.
The guardian angels, you have to ask them to help you.
Yeah.
They're just
And the
sitting
help
there
is there.
waiting. They're waiting for you to
Absolutely.
ask.
They want to help you. They're waiting to
Right.
help you, but you have to ask.
You have
So
to
I
ask.
think, universally, these recommendations are applicable to all of us. And, the way we change the situation on Earth at the moment is to put these things into operation. Fantastic. Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, you're more than welcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Jerry. I love the last one because I live by that. If I see something negative, I just tell it to go away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
literally say, there's no home for you here. Leave.
And I tell them to get lost, get out of here,
Just go.
get out of my
Because,
face.
and I can call in the good ones, and I have hope for the planet as well, because you can see the shift that's happening with people. People are
Yeah.
awake. And like what happened in America, that's going to have a ripple effect.
I think it's going to have a huge
already
ripple effect.
started, actually,
Yeah.
having a ripple effect. I always think of America as the throat chakra of the planet, because I feel like a lot of communication comes out of America. A lot of teaching comes out of America, So I think there's a big responsibility with regards to that, to send out positive messages through. Hollywood comes out of America. See, I mean, a lot of tech comes out of America. So America has a big responsibility in the art of communication. to clean it up and give us nice movies that we can laugh at and, you know, enjoy and cry because we're happy, instead of looking at pornography when we're looking at things we're watching with our kids. You know, it's crazy.
I think
I
that's
don't
why
know.
they've attacked us so heavily. I mean, we have been infiltrated
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
these negative scum all the way
Mhm.
down to the city and county levels.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a mass infiltration. And you
Yeah.
look what this Governor Newsom is doing in California. He is destroying that beautiful state. They went
Yeah.
from having a surplus, monetary surplus, to now being something like $20 billion in debt. You
Yeah.
know,
And a lot of people are leaving California and
oh, they're
moving
leaving.
elsewhere.
They're leaving by the hundreds of thousands. They're
Yeah.
flooding the entire West.
Mhm.
They're getting out of there. You know, he's increasing the gas tax. He's proposed a mileage tax. So if you drive your
Like,
car a certain amount of miles, you've got to pay him to drive your car so many miles. You know, thank God it looks like he's on his way out along with Justin
I
Trudeau.
certainly hope so.
They had to lock them both up in the same jail cell.
Mm.
exactly. Mm. Well, hasn't this been a wonderful discussion?
It certainly has. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much, both of you.
I've really enjoyed it too. And I like the solutions also. And I love your stories, Jerry, about your clients. And I don't know how you worked in the ER. I really don't. That would be one place. Like, I sometimes when people talk about my work, I say, I don't know how you do it. But to work in a hospital full of all the time, everything's on high alert, is a whole different ball game.
I think
That
what helped
requires something else.
what helped me there the most was that I was an adrenaline junkie.
Oh, okay.
If it wasn't for that, I don't think I could have got through the
Mm.
hospital, the emergency room, the prison, the prisoners, all of that tumultuous stuff. I was an adrenaline junkie. You know, I thrived on that. You know, okay, what's happening now, kind of thing.
Wow.
Well, Jerry, I'd like to thank you very much for bringing this very important information to the world. Your book is called An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower. And I thoroughly recommend it as an absolutely fascinating and uplifting read. So
I don't know
thank
how
you.
uplifting it would be.
Oh, no, it is uplifting. You know, when I got to the end of it, no, really, seriously, I found it uplifting, you know, because
Yeah.
you're bringing out such important information for the world, you know, and who else is doing so, you know?
No. That's
So,
how we came to the conclusion that the voices that schizophrenics were hearing were not auditory hallucinations.
yeah,
This is
yeah,
how we came to those conclusions,
yeah.
you know. And there's
This
still,
information, it goes way beyond just schizophrenics.
yes,
Yeah.
As I said, you know, this is applicable to everybody. This is something everybody needs to understand, you know. This is how we can turn our lives around, you know. So, you know, thank you very much for having the courage to bring this forward and bring it to the world. It's incredibly valuable.
well, Sherry Sweeney, without her, it would have never come about, you know. But it was very interesting how, you know, people just showed up to help. Like the cover was designed
Yes.
by a, what do you call it? Those guys who draw pictures and stuff with computers, a graphic artist in France. She goes, well, your cover, it just doesn't cut the mustard. I'll help you make a better one.
That's
She,
the divine
she,
plan.
yes,
Yeah.
she came up with that, and then all of a sudden, here comes somebody from France saying, uh, "Who was it? Poncet, Henry Poncet." He goes, "My wife would like to translate your book into French."
Oh,
And then
wow.
here comes somebody from Germany, said, "Hey,
Oh,
I'll translate it into German." And my
yeah.
wife translated it into Spanish, and then somebody showed up a couple of weeks ago. Hey, we want to translate it into Russian. I said, I'll help you all I can. Just tell me what I can do.
Oh,
Wonderful.
wow.
Fantastic.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, people. It's like the universe is jumping in there and going, okay, let's get this out. You know, because it was nothing I did. These people showed up out of nowhere.
But that's the whole point. I think that's the main message here, is that when you follow your heart, follow your moral code, and you're following the divine plan, you're doing something good, you will get all the help you need.
Yeah.
It will just come to you.
Yeah. Because
And
these people
that's,
came out of nowhere. It's like amazing. And it's a lot of work. You know, it
yes,
takes a lot of work to
absolutely,
translate that into German and Spanish and French and you know, it takes a lot of work.
yes,
Because
absolutely.
they're not directly translating it. They have to translate it with meaning and feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we should say our goodbyes because we've been on for over a couple of hours now. So Jerry, thank you very much indeed for talking to us tonight.
Oh, you're more than welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Jerry, for your time, your energy, your love, your expertise, everything that you're offering the planet. I would advise everyone to get an appointment with Jerry. I know you recommend other people as well, Jerry, but I loved you.
Oh yeah.
And go to your website. And really, I loved it.
Yeah, and
All
if you
of it.
can't,
So thank you.
I'm like 2 months behind now. But if you go to causisminstitute.com, there's like 50 of us on the planet right now. You should be able to find one of us that is undated. But yeah,
Great.
We'll add your links to the video.
Yeah,
okay.
we will. We
Yeah.
will. Thank
Susan,
you so
thank
much.
you very, very much for your input tonight. It's been a really fascinating conversation.
You guys are more than welcome. Thanks for having me.
Take
Thanks.
care
Thanks,
and
Jerry.
Merry
Thanks,
Christmas.
Claire.
All right. Merry
Lots of love
Christmas
and
to
Merry
you.
Christmas.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Hello, I wanted to do a little add-on to the interview with Jerry and Claire and myself to clarify a couple of things. The first subject I'd like to clarify is, or I'd like to sort of give a little bit more input to, is physical reality and your brain go together. So these two, let's say, planes of existence or frequencies work together in harmony to create our physical reality in which we live. The feelings, emotions, and spirit work together. So we could say that the masculine is the physical and the mental, and the feminine is the emotional and spiritual, or feelings and spiritual, because spirit speaks mostly through feelings, through inner knowings. And I know a lot of people would like to see things so that they have proof, but the most accurate would be your feelings, because when you have a feeling, you don't doubt it. You may push it down, you may want to ignore it, but it's there, loud and clear. So this is how it works. Now, at the moment, we are meant to be in unity consciousness, meaning my physical, emotional, feeling center, my mental and spiritual are in alignment. And part of the, let's say, EMF war is to separate us in that way. So what happens is electromagnetic fields damage your cells. So they damage the water in your body, as Claire was speaking about Dr. Emoto and the experiments that he did on water with a mobile phone. So that's the same thing that's happening to your body. And when that happens to your body, it cannot house the spirit, the clarity, and the feeling center that's going to give you that right nudge, that information that you need, lead you in the direction that you would like to go in. So when people say, oh, I had a miracle, I bumped into someone when I was thinking of them, it's not really a miracle. It's something that you created because you were in alignment. And when you have a lot of, let's say, EMF distortions in your body, then of course you're not going to be hearing your spirit, but you will be hearing demonic spirit, voice to skull. There's a lot of information being placed. And the way I like to look at it is we've all got these machines that don't require a cord anymore. So mobile phones, computers, etc. And I'm having a conversation with my friend using my phone, and that information is traveling on a frequency wave, going from A to B. The same with the images in your TV, etc. So therefore, I'm an organic body, and every conversation that's happening around me is traveling through my body. And you would wonder why you would go somewhere where there's a crowd of people and suddenly you would feel sad, maybe you would feel worthless, maybe you would feel confused, tired is another thing that people feel, because they're in a field with a lot of chatter and a lot of energy moving through their body, although you can't see it. You can't see the wind, but you see the result of the wind. And you need to look at your body as the result of that wind. The EMF is the wind traveling through it. And that's the reason why some people are getting depressed and feeling anxious. And there's a few schools in America and England now, and hopefully in Australia, that are starting to remove mobile phones, computers, etc. from the school, but also asking students not to use them after school. And the results are amazing. The teachers are saying that the students are now looking in their eyes when they communicate with them. They're being more creative, more physically active, and their minds are clear. They're able to memorize things, study better, but also find solutions. Because we are being programmed all the time with what we're meant to think is the result of something. Yet, well, anybody who's in a relationship would know you and your partner might have the same idea, but you have different ways of getting there. But the end product is exactly the same. You just have a different way of getting there. And children need to do that. They need to have a different way of getting there to stimulate their brain and to stimulate the community around them. Yeah, to create new things, not the same thing over and over and over again. So yeah, it's very important to have clear body from these things. And I know it's difficult, but if you can turn your computer and your phone and everything off at night, let's say from 10 till 7 in the morning, you will find your life, your brain will definitely thank you for it, but so will your body. You'll have more energy, you'll be less confused, less depressed, less anxious. All of these things are a byproduct. They're wonderful things, a byproduct of actually giving up the addiction. They're meant to be addictive so that they separate you. They're separating you from the people around you, from those you love, the things that you love even. But they're also separating you from yourself. And that would be the important thing that I'd like to add to the conversation. Bye for now.